Okay, welcome. And for those of you who have come early, I'm going to offer you a special gift. I've done this before. It has nothing to do with the class, but it's a story, special story. So you get rewarded for coming on time. And they say, if you wait for people who come late, then you punish the people who are early, and you award the people who are late. So we want to award the people who are early with a nice story, which you'll all appreciate. And welcome, all of you. Welcome, Pallavi. And Udi and Jamuna and everyone else. This is a story. This is an interesting story because recently I was studying about the importance of Srimad Bhagavatam. And as we said last week or the week before, of the 64 items of devotional service, there are 5 which are most important, and one of them is hearing the Bhagavatam. And there's a joke that if you have insomnia, hear the Bhagavatam, listen to the Bhagavatam, and you'll go to sleep. So the idea is that in our conditioned stage, we may not be so attracted to hearing, and we may be more attracted to reading novels, watching movies, reading the news. And the Bhagavatam may not be so attractive to us. So I wanted to read a story that might inspire us, perhaps. And it's called The Bull and the Bhagavad. There is a humorous saying in Oriya, Sanda Sunuchi Bhagavata, a bull hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam. And it's meant, the saying is to indicate something useless, like a bull. What's the use of a bull hearing the Bhagavatam? If you recite the Srimad Bhagavatam before a bull, what will he understand or appreciate? However, in Bhubaneswar, Orissa, recently, this phrase took on a new meaning. So recently means about 5 years ago, this story was written. In March 2004, many people had gathered at the ancient Shiva temple known as Kapileshwar Mahadev in the Old Town area of Bhubaneswar to observe the 22-year-old tradition of hearing a 9-day recitation of Srimad Bhagavatam. Just as the recitation was about to begin, a large bull entered the compound and sat down next to the devotees. Some devotees tried to chase him away, but he was a bit, bullish, and patiently ignored their protest. Everyone was surprised to see that as soon as the talk was finished, the bull got up to leave. However, they were even more surprised when he showed up on time the next day, listened, and again left when it was over. This went on for the duration of the event. That's 9 days. The bull came every day on time, stayed for the entire class, and then left. By the following year, most everyone had forgotten about the episode. That is, until the first day, when the same bull showed up right on time and again took his seat in the Bhagavatam class, or took a seat to hear the Bhagavatam. Again, this went on every day for the duration of the program. This year, so this story's been told in 2006. This year, in 2006, everyone was wondering if he would come again. Sure enough, on the first day, our stubborn bovine friend came sauntering through the gate and quietly took his place next to the devotees. Whatever it may mean, this bull hearing the Bhagavatam has become the biggest attraction at the festival. So, the reason this story is there, not only because it's interesting and humorous, but it's kind of, I find it kind of inspiring that a bull might be more attracted to hear the Bhagavatam than we are. And we can talk a little bit about the Bhagavatam. Well, what's so special about the Bhagavatam? There's so many Vedic literatures. And the Bhagavatam is considered to be the essence. If you took all the Vedas and you wanted just the essence, not only the essence, but the most important aspects, that would be the Bhagavatam. And why is that? Because in the Bhagavatam, the only concern is about pure devotional service, and the only concern is about Krishna. So everything that's discussed in the Bhagavatam will help us come closer to Krishna. There's nothing that's going to divert us in any way, to take a longer path. Do some karma, and then gradually through stages of karma you'll come to bhakti. No, it's not like that. It just delivers bhakti, it delivers Krishna, and delivers all the instructions necessary to develop pure Krishna consciousness. So Lord Chaitanya revered the Bhagavatam as the greatest scripture. And the interesting thing is that in the line of Lord Chaitanya you'll find that most of the books that are written by Lord Chaitanya's followers are directly or indirectly based on the Bhagavatam, commenting on the Bhagavatam, expanding on the Bhagavatam, further explaining the Bhagavatam. So the Bhagavatam is an important scripture for us. So, back to the concept of sadhana, there's a couple of thoughts I had last week, and I think the basic thought along the lines of what sadhana means, the word sadhana means practice. So the basic idea is that you can't really, anything you want to get good at. What do people say? You want to get good at something, what do they say? Practice, and then what do you do when you finish practicing? You practice again. And many people I've heard, very successful people, have said that they don't believe that their success is because of their talent as much as it is because of their practice, their willingness to practice their craft or their art. And I've heard, sorry there, got shaken up here. Our producer is shaking us up. So I've heard many of them also say that because they didn't feel that they were as gifted as others, they realized that they needed to practice more than others. So they would say, when others were sleeping or when others had retired, they would continue practicing. And that's how they were able to rise to the top in their field. This is constant practice. So sadhana is a practice. And if you think about it, how will you become Krishna conscious if you don't have a practice? If there's not regular things that you do to bring you closer to Krishna, or regular things that you do that revive your Krishna consciousness or purify your consciousness, then how you be Krishna conscious? It's not just kind of happen kind of automatically, although that could happen by the grace of Krishna or the grace of his pure devotee. It could happen, but we can't rely on that. That would be like winning the lottery. So we rely on a practice that if I do certain things, Shastra, scripture says I'll get certain results. But it's interesting, the way it's described in scripture, it's not exactly like a formula. You do A, B, and C and you get a result. Krishna consciousness is not like that. Because ultimately Krishna consciousness is coming through Krishna's devotee, it's coming through Krishna through his mercy. So the way Prabhupada explains it is that by doing certain things, in certain practices of bhakti, our dormant Krishna consciousness is ignited or revived. It's something which is coming out, which is within us. But the practices help bring it out. So, if you think someone tells you, I'm spiritual, so naturally you want to think, well, what is it that you do on a daily basis that makes you spiritual? And if they, a lot of people claim to be spiritual, but you can't find anything in their life that's any different than people who are not spiritual, or people who will admit they're not spiritual. So if you say you're spiritual, then naturally we would think you do something to indicate that. You have some regular practice. And so then you see this. In the Catholic Church, they chant the rosary. The monks and the nuns, they have their spiritual practice. I actually saw a movie, not a movie, it was a documentary on a convent, and they're up about 5 o'clock and they're chanting on their rosary. So, and they go through a whole schedule. So it's natural you have a practice. Now, the interesting thing about the practice is that all the practice really is, and this is true of most practices, you're practicing to do what you will do more spontaneously when you learn how to do it, or when you develop an attraction for it. So, practice, you practice enough, it becomes like a habit, you can do it easily. So, if you look at all the practices and all the items of bhakti that we're asked to practice, we're only asked to practice things which we would naturally be doing if we love Krishna. Just like we're told to hear Srimad Bhagavatam. Here's an example. Now, Prabhupada said, if you develop an attraction for hearing the Bhagavatam, you develop an actual attraction, you will lose your attraction to all other literature. And I know for many devotees, reading other literature can be an obstacle. It may be reading novels, it simply may be reading the news. But Srila Prabhupada said, when you develop an attraction for the Bhagavatam, then the taste you get from hearing it and the benefit you get from hearing it is such that you won't want to read anything else. You just won't be attracted. You may have to read something else, but you're not attracted to doing it. You're not spontaneously attracted. So we are told we should hear the Bhagavatam. So that's a practice before the attraction is there. But it's not that when you become a pure devotee, you say, well, I've done the practice, so I don't have to do it anymore. It doesn't work that way, because the very practice you're doing is what you'll want to do naturally when you become Krishna conscious. So that's how it works. So that's all we're doing. Where sometimes Prabhupada would use the phrase or the idea that we're practicing pure devotees. In other words, we're practicing pure devotional service. We're practicing the things that pure devotees do. And Prabhupada makes the point, and this is probably the most important point, that unless we have a regular practice, we won't become attracted to doing those things. That's where the practice comes. And I read something today which I found very interesting. I don't know, I forget who said it. But the person made the point, if you want to do something, and the person made the point, if you say, well, I'll do it tomorrow, he made the point, it's going to be harder to do tomorrow. Now, why is that? Because it's another day you've gone not doing it. So every time you say, I'll do it tomorrow, I'll do it next week, or I'll do it next month, that means you're not doing it for another day or another week, another month, or however long it is. So you're becoming more habituated not to do it. So that's the idea of a practice, where it becomes, some people say if you do something every day for 30 days, it becomes a habit. Other people say it'll take you 90 days. But the point is, if you do it, you become habituated to do it, and then naturally the habit becomes part of you, and in Krishna consciousness that's a very good thing. And not only that, it becomes a part of you, but it becomes something you want to do, because it's benefiting you so much. And it becomes something that's pleasurable, enjoyable. But the point is that we may not naturally be attracted to doing everything in Krishna consciousness, because when we're influenced by the modes of nature, we tend to be attracted to acting more impetuously, according to our nature. Well, I'd rather do this now. So, of course, the character of any great person is the ability to discipline themselves, the ability to do something that you really don't want to do because it's a priority. So sadhana is a little bit like that, at least in the beginning, that we may not always want to do it, but we do it because we know it's the right thing. And then through that practice, as I said, we become more and more attracted to the practice itself, because all the practices of sadhana are non-different from Krishna. Chanting is non-different. Hearing the Bhagavatam, the Prabhupada said many times, and the Bhagavatam says itself, the Bhagavatam is Krishna. The Prabhupada said you can see Krishna on every page of the Bhagavatam. The book is Krishna. Deity worship, that is Krishna. The Dham, living in the Dham, it's another practice. The Dham is non-different from Krishna. Chanting the holy name, that is Krishna. Associating with devotees. Prabhupada said devotional service can't be perfect and successful without the association of devotees. Prabhupada said, association of Shastra said, association of devotees is the root cause of devotional service. So in the association of devotees, Krishna becomes manifest. There's that famous verse, Naham tishtami vaikunte, hridaya. I don't live in Vaikuntha and I don't live in the heart. But I live wherever my devotees are chanting my glories. So we bring devotees together, Krishna appears. So naturally, by performing these activities, because these activities are non-different from Krishna, we'll become more and more attracted to them. So that's the idea of sadhana. So I wanted to read a few things Prabhupada said about sadhana, just to give us a better understanding. I have some notes. I think I have some notes. Yes, I do. Excuse me, I'm going down to pick up the paper. Okay. All right. Pallavi has something to tell us about sleeping while reading the Bhagavatam. Isn't it possible that one so wants to read a book but still ends up feeling sleepy reading it? Feels like a fault that, however... Of course, if you're reading late at night, yes. But we have the example of Parikshit Maharaj. Parikshit Maharaj heard the Bhagavatam from Sukadeva Goswami. And Parikshit Maharaj only had 7 days to live, so he didn't want to waste any time. And he was very anxious to hear the Bhagavatam. So he decided he wouldn't eat and he wouldn't sleep. So generally, if something is really important to us, it wakes us up. So many times I might be chanting and feeling sleepy, and I feel somewhat guilty, even though perhaps I'm sleepy because I've worked hard or I haven't slept enough, but still I feel somewhat guilty because I know if I really were attracted to the holy name, it would wake me up, it would inspire me, it would enliven me. So I've actually had this experience. I was listening to a lecture, and the lecture was kind of like this, it was late at night and I was getting really kind of tired and sleepy while I was listening to it. It was very relaxing, and this is what it was. I was driving my car. So it was getting kind of dangerous to drive hearing the lecture like that, and it's kind of I think it was hypnotizing me. And then I put on another lecture, it was kind of like this, and was talking, and immediately I woke up because there was energy there. And so when we're reading, sometimes internally we're kind of putting ourselves to sleep. So of course, if you're extremely tired, you may fall asleep reading anything. So it's not absolutely means we're not attracted. But the point is that as you advance in Krishna consciousness, you become more and more attracted to hearing, and it wakes you up, it enlivens you, it inspires you. So we have the example of Parikshit Maharaj. He went 7 days without eating and sleeping, and then it said he said, I'm not feeling tired and I'm not feeling hungry because I'm totally absorbed in the transcendental platform. He just totally transcended by meditating on Krishna. So that is possible, and maybe not possible immediately, but at least the idea is there. That we understand that ultimately, when I become Krishna conscious, then I could go on hearing and not tiring. And in the Bhagavatam, there was a group of sages, and they were hearing from Sutta Goswami because Sutta Goswami heard when Sukadeva Goswami spoke to Parikshit Maharaj. So they wanted to hear what he had heard. So they said, we never tire of hearing what you're saying. Just keep going on. So when you have a taste for hearing the Bhagavatam, you'll never tire. You just want to hear more and more, like a good story. There's a saying in German that we read stories to children to put them to sleep, and we read stories to adults to wake them up. So Bhagavatam is meant to wake us up. Maybe put the kids to sleep, but to wake us up. Okay. I think it's a fault. Of course, if you're reading at night, you expect to fall asleep. But we know if we're really interested in something, we don't fall asleep. That's for sure. So we also know we, as I said, we gain the attraction by reading it. That's how we become attracted to it. So we may even have to read it and fall asleep before we become attracted. But I would recommend to all of you out there that every day you try to read Bhagavatam, even one verse. Because that is the most... Bhagavatam is an expansion of Om. Pranamba Om Kara expands. And that is the Bhagavatam. It's the Om is the seed, and Bhagavatam is the explanation, and Bhagavatam is Krishna. So we'll discuss more about the Bhagavatam. I was just using that as an example. So let's read the verse that describes the 5 most important items of sadhana bhakti. Sadhu Sangha Namakirtan Bhagavat Shravana Mathoravas Srimurtira Shraddhaya Sevana. So Sadhu Sangha means associating with advanced devotees. Nam Kirtan means chanting the name of Krishna. That could be japa. It could be kirtan, singing. Bhagavat Shravana means to hear the Bhagavatam. Mathuravas means to live in Mathura, or to live in a holy place. And Srimurtira Shraddhaya Sevan, to faithfully serve the deity. These are the 5 most important items. And these 5 were drawn from 64 items, or 64 angas, or limbs of bhakti. And of all of these, it is said 5 are most important. And of all of these 5, it is said 2 are most important. Who can guess the 2? Of the 5, what do you think are the 2 most important? 5 are association, chanting, hearing Bhagavatam, living in a holy place, and serving the deity. What do you think are the 2 most important? Udi's going to guess.
Hearing and chanting.
Well, hearing is the Bhagavatam. Chanting. So you will say hearing the Bhagavatam and Kirtan? You got 1 right. Japa, yes. Pallavi said japa, yeah. So you both got the Kirtan right. And association, yes. But the interesting thing about association is especially association with sadhus, is considered the root cause of bhakti. That you can't get bhakti without it. And it is also described that after you get bhakti, even in the stage of love of God, it becomes a constant. It's not like, now I have love of Krishna, so I don't need the devotee. Because it becomes the basis of one's activities even in that stage. So all the items, association and chanting the holy name, are important, most important. And association is essential. And we discussed that yesterday. One of the reasons it's essential from a negative perspective is that if we associate with people who are not Krishna conscious, then we imbibe their nature, their qualities, their attitudes, and their modes, and we get pulled down. And if we associate with people who are Krishna conscious, we get pulled up. So it only makes sense that we want to get pulled up. And a lot of this getting pulled up or pulled down does not have to do so much with us. It has more to do with the association we put ourselves in. Because in the right association, you'll get pulled up. Even you may not be feeling so inspired, but you will get inspired by the association. So, let's read some other verses. The next verse, the verse after this is from the Madhya Lila, chapter 22. I just read verse 129. Verse 130 says, Sakala sadhana shrestha e pancha anga Krishna prema janmaya e panchera apasanga sangha. Anga Sangha. Translation: these 5 limbs of devotional service are the best of all. Even a slight performance of these 5 awaken love of Krishna. So they're so powerful. We don't have to do a lot. Even, like I'm saying, just reading a little bit of the Bhagavatam. Chanting the holy name. Prabhupada said we should chant 16 rounds. He said 16 is not much, because in Gaudiya Mat, or generally In the time of Mahaprabhu, 64 rounds was what they chanted. So Prabhupada said, chant 16, it's not much, only takes 2 hours. Now you might say, when Prabhupada said it only took 2 hours, that was back in the day when we weren't so busy. Because that was back in the day when we didn't have all the modern time-saving devices. And now that we have all the modern time-saving devices, we're 10 times as busy. Because all the modern time-saving devices enable you to do more. So instead of saving time, they make us work more. True or true? So, let us read the next verse. This is the purport to the verse we just read. Even a slight performance of these 5 awakens love for Krishna. So Prabhupada quotes a verse from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu by Rupa Goswami, who says, the glorification of these 5 items is to make known the complete superiority of these 5 practices of devotional service. So as I said, there are 64 items. These 5 are the most powerful. So we don't want to neglect these 5. So then naturally you're out there wondering, well, it says live in Mathura. So what does that mean? It means make your house like Mathura. Live in a holy place or live near a temple, one or the other, or make your home a temple. And then you'll be living in a sacred place. Make your home sacred. Worship the deity. Well, what if you're not a Brahmin? What if you're not installed? Well, you can put pictures of Krishna on your altar. You can offer your food to Krishna. You can offer incense to the picture. Srila Prabhupada, Lord Chaitanya, your spiritual master. Or you, spiritual master you're aspiring to take initiation from. You can have their pictures, because the pictures are also non-different. So, okay, I'm going to read something because I find this interesting. Some of the principles that Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who is the spiritual master of Srila Prabhupada's spiritual master, some of the principles that he's given, they're general principles on practicing sadhana. And we'll read a few and we can discuss a few. These are just broad general principles on the practice. Remember, we're talking about practice. Dan wants to know the 5 items. Dan, I'm going to give you the verse. It's from the Madhya Lila, chapter 22, verse 129. And we're going to let you guess what they are. See if you can guess. And I'll give you a hint. Verse 120, verse 129. I will give you a hint. And here's the hint. If you go to a Hare Krishna temple in the morning, they have a program in which there's kirtan, there's Bhagavatam class, there is deity worship, there is association of devotees, and of course the temple is a holy place. So I just told you what the 5 are. So if you still didn't get it, I'm going to be a little Buddha-like here. If you still didn't get it, then go to that verse, and you can go to that verse. Where can you go on Krishna.com and find that? If you go to the database on Krishna.com, you can find what are the 5 most important activities, which are just what I said, what we do in the temple. We have kirtan, we have deity worship, we have Bhagavatam class every day, we associate with devotees, and we are in a holy place. So those are the 5. And we do those because, as Prabhupada said, they're the most important. And so the idea of practice is that we do them every day. In the Bhagavatam, there's a verse that says, Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. We should hear the Bhagavatam Nityam, constantly. And one understanding of constantly is every day hear it. So in our temples, every day we have Bhagavatam class. And why should we hear every day? Because for thousands and millions of years and thousands and millions of times, we've been hearing other things. So it takes time to recondition ourselves. Just like if you have a picture and the picture is folded up like this. You see here, it's folded up like this, right? And you have it in a tube. And it's been in that tube for a few months. And you take it out. What happens when you take it out? The picture's like this. Isn't it? You try to flatten it and it goes like this. Right? Flatten it and it goes like this. Correct? Flatten it, open it up, it keeps going like that. So, as conditioned souls, we've performed material activities so many times that we're like this paper, right? So every time we flatten it, it goes up. So you can't just flatten it once and say, well, I chanted Hare Krishna today, paper should be flat. No, the paper keeps coming up. You've got to keep flattening it out. You've got to turn it the other way. You've got to put something on it. You have to do something. So that's the meaning of being conditioned. You know, you want, for example, let's say you want to overcome criticism. So, you know, for millions of lifetimes and millions of times, we've criticized people. So then you want to practice appreciating people. So you'll have to practice it millions of times to develop the new habit. So for millions of lifetimes, we may not have been chanting Krishna's glories. We may have been chanting our own glories. Not we may have, we were. Or the glories of some person in the material world who we respected. So sadhana is this practice to develop the habits which will then become natural to us as spiritual beings. So that's the idea. So let's read a few things, just general principles about practicing sadhana. And I think it's helpful for us to read this because what you'll see by reading this is you'll see sadhana is a bit like a prescription for a diseased person. So you need to do this. You take this medicine, take this diet, do these exercises, be careful not to do this, be careful not to eat that. Once a week you're going to have to take this kind of bath. You know, you'll see sadhana is just like that because Prabhupada said that the modes of nature, particularly passion and goodness, are infections. And so spiritual practice is the inoculation to the infection. Because we're coming in contact in the material world, we come in contact with these modes of nature. And so if our transcendental immune system is not strong, we become infected. So Krishna consciousness is the process, it's like the inoculation, the vaccination. It keeps us immune from the diseases of the lower modes of nature, but that's the practice. Or it's kind of like a diabetic has to take the insulin every day. So this is our inoculation against the disease or the infection of the modes of nature. So that's why it's got to be regular. So anyway, let's hear some of the other practices. Here's what Bhaktivinoda Thakur says on wealth. At every stage of life, one should accept only as much wealth as needed for the practice of devotional service. And this is interesting because sometimes a lot of wealth comes to us. And he's saying, well, just accept what you need. So what does that mean? It means accept what you need and use the rest for helping make other people Krishna conscious, for spreading the mission of Krishna consciousness. By desiring more wealth than needed, bhakti will disappear. If wealth is not accepted according to one's need, however, then the practice of devotional service will be hampered. The whole idea is that as conditioned souls, we are attached to money, we're attached to wealth. This is why we're here in this world. It's a very simple concept to grasp, that we're here in this world because of material attachment. If we weren't attached, we wouldn't be here. We would be with Krishna now. So the things we're attached to, gradually we need to give up. And wealth is a big attachment, because with wealth comes power, comes control, comes the fulfillment of so many desires. And the principle of bhakti is accept what you need, and not more than that. As Bhaktivinoda Thakur says it can, what does he say? It can hamper our bhakti. Wealth is not bad, but if we're desiring wealth to enjoy this world, more and more wealth to gain more and more enjoyment, then that means we're not thinking about Krishna's enjoyment, we're thinking about our enjoyment. We're supposed to be thinking about Krishna's enjoyment. And ultimately, we're supposed to be thinking all wealth belongs to Krishna, belongs to my Guru, or belongs to Krishna. So I use it for them. they can better use it, I might blow it. Prabhupada makes a point, it's a really interesting point, because things are so different now. He said, traditionally, people didn't live in big homes. They didn't live in palatial buildings, they didn't live in mansions. Nowadays it's all about how big can your home be, and how nice can it be, and how much property can it be on. As much as you can afford, that's how nice the home you're going to have is. He said, but in former times, the big, palatial, beautiful homes, so to speak, were the temples. That's where people put their money. They didn't build big homes for themselves. Nice. They lived simply. The nice home was for Krishna, for God. So, is money bad? It can be. If our goal in life is just to acquire more and more money, that is bad. Of course, we need money to live. That goes without saying. But here the principle is simplicity. It might come to the point where our money's not worth anything. Anyway. Some person was telling me, he said, the next stage after a recession is a depression. And he said, in a depression, the money becomes worthless. So you want to buy a loaf of bread and you have to go to the bank and get like $10,000 out of the bank to buy a loaf of bread. The money becomes worthless. So anyway, it's a thought. So this is what Bhaktivinoda Thakur says on mercy. One should be merciful and not cause anxiety to any living entity. So he's saying this is part of the practice of sadhana. The heart should always be filled with compassion for others. Exhibiting mercy to all living entities is one of the limbs of devotional service. Isn't that interesting? It's one of the items of devotional service. One of the practices of sadhana is to be merciful. So how are we merciful? Well, we can feed animals prasadam, and we can tell other people about Krishna. Of course, we can give human beings prasadam as well. In any way we can help people become Krishna conscious. That is how we exhibit mercy. Material mercy produces good material karma, but it doesn't produce Krishna consciousness. So we want to give the supreme mercy. Of course, as grihastas, we should be kind to everyone, feed people who are hungry, help them, and so forth. But the real mercy is to give Krishna consciousness. Okay, now he talks on non-devotee association. One should only associate with non-devotees for business or work. One should not associate with them after that. And what he means by that, he goes on to explain elsewhere. He says, what he defines association as is the exchange of love, the exchange of the heart. That's the real meaning of association, because when there's an exchange of the heart, then there's deep attachment develops through that exchange. And the Bhagavatam says the same attachment we have for something material, if we transfer that attachment to the devotees, then that becomes a source of our liberation, or that becomes a source of our Krishna consciousness. Whereas that same attachment for something material becomes the cause of our entanglement, becomes the cause of repetition of birth and death. So we don't want to give our heart and soul in the association of non-devotees. We want to give our heart and soul to devotees and develop attachment for devotees, because it's through that attachment that we advance. And it's through attachment to non-devotees that we're pulled down. That's the idea. So at least Bhaktivinoda Thakur is saying, yes, we have to associate with people, we work with people. He said, but that we do out of duty, that's our duty. But deep heartfelt connection shouldn't be there, because that will have an ill effect on us. And we want to befriend people in such a way that we can bring them to Krishna. So it doesn't mean that we're impersonal, it doesn't mean we're unkind, we're not merciful. It doesn't mean any of that. But it means you only give your heart, you only reveal your mind, you only develop deep relationships with devotees, because that attachment is what causes bhakti. And a deep attachment for non-devotees will destroy it. A satsanga tyaga, a Vaishnav achar. The first behavior of a devotee is to give up the association of non-devotees. And in Rupa Goswami's Nectar of Instruction, he instructs that there are different characteristics that increase bhakti, and there's different characteristics that destroy it. And one of the things that he says destroys it is association of non-devotees. Okay, let's read on. This is a section on anger, pride, and lamentation. If you have any questions, just ask. Householders lament if they lose their wife, children, etc. But a practitioner of devotional service should not maintain this lamentation very long. They should quickly give up their lamentation and engage in the cultivation of Krishna consciousness. A practicing Vaishnava should give up all urges like lamentation and anger. Otherwise, there will be obstacles in his constant remembrance of Krishna. It is explained in the Padma Purana. Within the heart of one who is full of anger or pride or lamentation on the state of his wife or sons, there is no possibility of Krishna being manifest. So lamentation can easily overcome us at the loss of a loved one or the loss of anything which we're attached to. And so what this verse is saying, on one hand, it's natural to be angry or to lament, but if that lamentation continues long after the event, then it becomes an obstacle for bhakti, and then Krishna cannot reside in the heart of one who is lamenting. And generally, we understand lamentation as living in the past, lamenting for what's happened. Why did it have to happen that way? Why couldn't it have happened some other way? And we're just not able to accept what happened. And so that keeps us tied to the past. So generally we understand that being tied to the past through lamentation is symptomatic of ignorance. And in Bhagavad Gita, symptomatic of the spiritual platform is when one is free from lamentation, and the other side of lamentation is hankering. One is free from hankering. So easier said than done, but the idea is that we have to take responsibility for how we feel and pull ourselves up after some time, strengthen ourselves by taking shelter of Krishna's name, taking shelter of his devotees, and taking shelter of hearing from him, hearing his Shastra and hearing from the devotees. So we do our best to overcome our anger, overcome our lamentation, because it keeps us strongly bound, as I said, to the lower modes of nature. And then here this verse says, Krishna can't come in the heart of someone who's overwhelmed by lamentation or overwhelmed by anger. On Ekadasi, let's hear something about Ekadasi. One should carefully respect Sri Hari Vashara, Ekadasi. By observing Ekadasi, all the supporting principles of devotional service are practiced. So that's very important. I'll read that again. One should carefully respect Sri Hari Vashara, Ekadasi. By observing Ekadasi, all the supporting principles of devotional service are practiced. So Ekadasi is coming on Thursday, at least in Alachua. And traditionally, for Ekadasi, devotees didn't eat, and they didn't drink, and they didn't sleep. Now, Prabhupada didn't ask us to do that, because he knew if he asked us to do that, we wouldn't have been able to do it, so better not ask us to do it. And he said that actually service, particularly preaching service, is more important than fasting and just chanting. But the idea is, if one can increase one's chanting and increase one's level of austerity, perhaps fasting a half day, that one should do that. And on Ekadasi, we don't eat any grains or beans. We do some austerity. And it is considered, or as said by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Ekadasi is the mother of devotion. So we can observe, as Prabhupada said, we can observe by fasting from grains and beans, hearing, increasing our hearing, and increasing our chanting. So if one can, Prabhupada said one should chant 25 rounds on Ekadasi, because Ekadasi is an auspicious day, and chanting is more powerful on that day. So anyway, it's an item of devotional service. It's a day in which we can take advantage of. That's the idea. And we can improve our bhakti on Ekadasi, because there's a lot of potency there, and we can pray for others on Ekadasi. We can chant for others. We can pray for them, and they will benefit. also. So we'll read about chanting the holy name. This is very interesting. Bhaktivinoda Thakur here is quoting Padma Purana. He's making an interesting point. The verse starts out, Sarva paradi kudapi muchite hari samshaya harerapi aparadam ya kuryadvi pada pankshanaha namashaya kadachit sat taratyeva sanamataha namno hi sarva surhido hyaparadat patyadaha. The purport is that if one takes shelter of Lord Hari, then all his offenses are vanquished. All offenses committed in the service of the Lord are destroyed by taking shelter of the holy names. Isn't that interesting? We can commit offense in serving the deity. We can commit offenses to the Dham. We can commit offenses to devotees. We can commit offenses to the Lord within our mind. Here it says, all offenses committed in the service of the Lord are destroyed by taking shelter of the holy name. Of course, if you offend a devotee, you should ask the devotee's forgiveness. We are now reading from, no, we're not reading from the Chaitanya Charitamrita anymore. We're reading, reading selected verses. All offenses committed in the service of the Lord are destroyed by taking shelter of the holy name. We'll answer your question, Dan, in a minute. The holy name alone delivers the Vaishnavas, but those who have taken shelter of the holy name must give up the 10 offenses in chanting. Otherwise, they will surely fall down, even though they have taken shelter of the holy names. So I like what Bhaktivinoda Thakur is saying and the way he's saying it. And he's saying, if you offended the Lord, or if you committed other offenses in Krishna consciousness, and we've all offended Krishna because we've come to the material world. So we're in the material world because at some point we turned our back on Krishna. Bahirmukha. We've turned our face away from Krishna and towards Maya. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur is saying, and other verses in Shastra say, that the holy name is so merciful that even though we offend Krishna, still, if we chant the holy name, we'll become free from those offenses. So we can go somewhere. Just like if the mother is angry at the child might run to the father, or vice versa, to find some shelter. I've offended my mother, or my mother's angry at me. I want to go somewhere where someone will have compassion on me. So if I've offended Krishna, what can I do? I go to the holy name. And the holy name will absolve me of those offenses. But what this verse is saying, but if you offend the holy name, then where are you going to go? That's the whole point. So it's very valuable lesson here to meditate on. Well, the holy name will free me from my offenses, but if I offend the holy name, then what else will free me? Of course, Shastra says we'll continue chanting, but the point is, don't continue chanting offensively. And how do you avoid offenses? You make a valiant effort to chant by hearing the name, focusing on the name, and praying to the name. So now Dan is asking, how is lamentation exhibited in the spiritual world? Because Dan understands that whatever exists in this world is a perverted reflection of what exists in the spiritual world. So if there is lamentation in this world, there must be lamentation in the spiritual world. So, simple understanding is that anything which is spiritual draws you closer to Krishna, and anything which is material pushes you further away from Krishna. So material lamentation, as we read in that verse, makes it impossible for Krishna to sit in our heart. Whereas in spiritual lamentation, I'm lamenting that I'm separated from Krishna, or I'm lamenting that I have not been able to serve Krishna properly, or serve Krishna with real love or real devotion, or Krishna has disappeared from me and I want his association. So that lamentation is full of smaranam, remembrance of Krishna. It's full of bhav, emotion for Krishna. So, it's not material lamentation. It's not lamenting the loss of anything material. Now, we can even exhibit some form of lamentation on the level of practice of sadhana. It's not the same as the lamentation I just described, but we can be in the mood of lamenting our separation from Krishna. Not separation out of love, but separation out of a lack of love. Or in other words, we can be lamenting our lack of love, our separation from love of Krishna. I have Krishna, I have no love for you, and therefore I'm lamenting. I'm lamenting that I don't have love for you, which means that I'm hankering. The lamenting becomes the hankering. I'm hankering for the love. I want to have it. I wish I had it. Krishna, help me, please. My life is miserable without you. So that brings us closer to Krishna. So that kind of lamentation is not symptomatic of ignorance. And that kind of lamentation actually makes you blissful. So you see everything in the spiritual world, even it looks like anger, even it looks like depression, even it looks like lamentation, it's all very blissful because it's really bringing you closer to Krishna. So that's why you find, for example, the gopis, they're lamenting in separation from Krishna, but that separation, Prabhupada says, is causing them to be fully fixed in remembering Krishna. And the more intense they feel the separation, the more intensely they're thinking of Krishna. And so you can't be miserable if you're thinking of Krishna. It's not possible. It's an oxymoron. It's a complete paradox. Because Krishna is all blissful. So when you think of Krishna, you become blissful, just like you can't touch fire and not get burned. You can't touch the all blissful and not be blissful. So if the separation is causing you separation from good sadhana, separation from feeling Krishna's presence while you're chanting, any of that, if that's causing you to become more absorbed in Krishna, to pray to Krishna, then you're thinking of Krishna. And so then it becomes blissful. So the very thing that seems to be painful becomes blissful. That's the idea. I hope that makes sense. So we will read a few other things. We have 7 more minutes. If you have any questions, please. We're reading from a book written by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. The book is called Bhaktya Loka, the abode or the planet of bhakti. So he's in this section that we're reading from, he's describing sadhana bhakti. Sadhana and sadhya. One should practice all these limbs of bhakti to the best of one's capacity, after receiving them from the spiritual master. So then he says, servitude, friendship, and complete surrender are the activities for awakening bhava. Bhava is the stage preliminary to love of God. In reality, these activities themselves become bhava. The activities he's referring to are service, friendship, and surrender. Said they awaken bhava, but they become bhava, as the point we were making before. Chanting awakens more chanting. Chanting awakens pure chanting. Only in the stage of sadhana are they counted as sadhana bhakti. So, servitude, friendship, surrender is a practice of sadhana, but it's also a symptom of love. So, Bhaktivinoda says, well, these activities become love. Then the last point is about surrender. The whole life of a practitioner should be decorated with full surrender. 6 types of surrender are explained in many places in devotional scriptures. The life of a living entity is useless without surrender. The living entity should always worship Krishna with full surrender. So, surrender to Krishna is defined in different ways, but one explanation is given. That surrender means to accept whatever is pleasing to Krishna, what will ever help you advance in devotional service, whatever is favorable for Krishna consciousness, you accept that. And that might mean something's favorable, but you're not inclined to do it. Or you're attached to something, but it's favorable to be detached. Or you're detached from something, but it's favorable to use it in Krishna's service. So to accept what's favorable, and the second principle is to renounce, give up, neglect what is not favorable. sometimes very difficult. In our culture, modern culture, we're more trained, well, if I don't feel like doing it, why should I do it? I should just find something I feel like doing and do it. So there is some truth to that, particularly when you're trying to understand what your mission in life is, what wakes you up, what moves you, what motivates you. Because you want to find something in your life that inspires you in Krishna's service. And you don't want to do something that's so disconnected from your nature. So that's there. But this point here is a little different. This point is, it's the idea of the practice of the principles that we must do to develop love for Krishna, and that we do them even when we don't feel like them. And in our culture, it's often difficult for us to do things we don't feel like doing. And we think, well, if I don't feel like doing it, why should I do it? Because that's how our culture trains us. We're comfort creatures. We have things the way we want. We have so many choices in life now that maybe people didn't have 100 years ago. So we're just kind of in the mood of, well, what do I want? And why should I do what I don't want? So that's the idea of that he's making here. The whole life of a practitioner should be decorated with full surrender. Whatever's favorable, whatever's not favorable, I reject it. Whatever's favorable, I accept it. As far as possible. And if I can't completely accept what is not favorable, then I partly accept. And if I can't completely reject what is unfavorable, then I partially reject it. And gradually I move forward. So as I said, sadhana is like a person with a disease that's given a prescription for diet, for exercise, and other activities. So try to think of your condition in developing Krishna consciousness like that. You're always trying to keep yourself in the fire of Krishna consciousness, and think of Krishna consciousness as a purifying fire. And think of chanting. Chanting means you're connecting with the fire. And the better you're chanting, the more you'll feel the fire. And reading Bhagavatam, hearing Bhagavatam, is connecting you with that fire. And the more intent and intensely and submissively, I mean with the intention to advance, the more you chant with the intention to advance, the more submissively and with an open mind and with attention you hear Bhagavatam, the closer you come to the fire, the more you feel the heat. It's the same with all the devotional activities. So that's a nice meditation for us. How can I always be near the heat or the influence of Krishna consciousness, particularly through these 5 activities? And what are the 5 again? Hearing what? Newsweek? Is that one of the 5? Hearing Sports Illustrated? No, it was the Bhagavatam. Yeah, that's it. Chanting the top 40 songs? Is that what it is? No, it's chanting about who? Krishna. Living in a sacred place. And how do you make your place sacred? Bring Krishna into your place. You bring devotees into your place. Then your home becomes sacred. Worshipping the deity. And as we said, just pictures in your house. There should be pictures of Krishna everywhere. You should have an altar. You should just be reminded of Krishna wherever you go. And chanting and associating. If you can't associate with devotees personally, you can associate with them on Krishna.com, through live chat, through every evening at this time, 8 to 9, someone else is speaking. You can associate through different websites, through email, somehow or other. Stay in the fire, stay close to the fire, and that fire will push you to Krishna and burn up your material attachments. So, we have come to the end. So if anyone is dying to ask a question, we don't want you to die, but we'd rather have you ask the question. And so I'll wait for you. Ask a question. Of course, dying is not so bad. Actually, dying is good if you die in Krishna consciousness. Nothing to lament. We should never lament unless someone doesn't die in Krishna consciousness. Then, or if someone is not engaged in Krishna consciousness, then it's lamentable in a sense. But if someone is engaged in Krishna consciousness, or if someone is in the family of a devotee, if someone has taken prasadam or seen the deity, there's nothing to lament. That person is eternally benefited. So, Dan, your name in Sanskrit means wealth. May you always have a wealth of Krishna consciousness. It's actually Dan, not Dan. Because Dan's a name also. Dan, I don't think is Sanskrit. It's Dan. But anyway. Okay, you're welcome, Dan. Dan. And we will see everyone next week. Actually, next week may be a problem because my wife is out of town and I'll be alone with my daughter. And I don't know if I can convince her to come here. She once did a program. You can look on the programs about chanting. She once did a program about chanting. I think she's on here in the archives. What do they look under? He doesn't know anymore. She's changed the website so many times. He can't even remember. All I know is it's not easy to find because I look for it all the time and I find difficulty with the archives. He's going to find out now how to do that. And we'll tell you how to do that, but if you look up Mahatma, you won't get anything. But you go to krishna.com/TV, and that's a good place to start. And you might get lucky and find it. Yeah, it's probably there somewhere. It seems, we're looking at the screen now, it seems like we're seeing it. Because I see some of my courses. So, what were we just, I'm so tired, what were we just telling them to look for?
Your daughter.
Oh, my daughter, yeah, on one of the, so you go krishna.com/TV and then you'll see so many shows there. You might see her. So I don't know if I can get it. So anyway, we'll stay posted, stay on the edge of your seat, and maybe next week we'll be back, if not the week after. Thank you, Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.